Welcome to another episode of RabbitWerks live coding sessions. Tonight is episode 3 of the Filtrify photo app, and tonight we're going to be building out a little bit of CSS variables for filters, and we're going to get started on the Vuex store for state management, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to that as well. A little bit of information about Vuex tonight, so cool. First of all, we're going to start by building a filter input component. So if we look at this app that we have so far, it's just a basic, we got our image display panel right here, and then we have an image loading input right here, and then this empty space right here on the left is going to be where our filter input components are going to load in, and we're going to have quite a handful of them, and they're going to be controlling CSS filter variables that we will set up tonight as well. So cool. Without any further ado, let's thank Free Code Camp Radio for the awesome beats as always. Link is in the description. You can go check them out and donate to the cause. And cool. Cloudinary also we're going to be integrating into this app at some point down the road. So if you want to check out a free Cloudinary account for asset and media hosting, you can check out the reference link in the description as well. Cool. All right, our filter input component. So let's get into the app and get started. We can close out all this good stuff. And so let's see. All right, so we're starting from the very start for the filter component. Just gonna move this over just slightly. Cool. And okay, so we're gonna go into the components folder, right click and say not new file. We're gonna say new folder, and we'll call it the filter panel. Oh, we already have a filter panel. That's fine, we'll do that. We'll just put a filter panel folder, and we're gonna actually put that in the control panel directory. So inside the control panel folder we have a filter panel folder, and we're gonna take our filter panel component that we have built out, and we're just gonna put it into the filter panel folder just to kind of keep it together with the input. And it's gonna break because it's not sure where this component just went, but that's fine for now. We can come into right here, the control panel.view, and then we're just gonna have to update our import statement right here. So it's not gonna be just at filter panel, it's gonna be at /filter panel /filter panel. If I can spell correctly tonight. Panel. Cool. Okay, back in there. So now in the filter panel .view, we're going to want to dynamically render a list of inputs. And the way we're going to do that is using the v-for directive. But first, in order to do that, we're going to need some sort of data. And for right now, before we have our Vuex store set up, we're just going to use a filler count for the v-for loop, and I'll show how that works in just a minute. But before we get into that, we need to create that image or the filter input component. So let's do that. Right click on filter panel, and we'll say new, or the filter panel folder. We'll say new file, and we'll call it filter input .view. Cool. And then same thing as always, we'll type out scaffold, and that'll give us a boilerplate for a view component. Alright, cool. And then so what we'll do in here is we'll start by setting up a div, and we'll just say filter input outer. Cool. And next thing we are going to want to put in there is just have the label, and that's gonna be for, well, we're gonna have to set that dynamically because we'll pass in the information to this filter based on our state. But for now, we'll just leave that blank, and we're just going to give this a title. All of this good stuff is going to be taken care of. We'll just say, oops, filter name. Let's just throw a data object inside our Vue instance really quick, just to get some placeholder data in there. And actually, you know what, this is just gonna say, yeah, we'll just do this for right now. And so we have a label, and it's gonna have a filter name, and then we're gonna need an input, and that is the type of range, right, like that. And then so we'll set up the ID dynamically as well. You're not too late, Andrew. I just started, actually. Got off to a late start tonight, so you got here just in time. I know that CJ just started his stuff too, so cool. Thanks for checking it out. So right now we're just building a filter input component to generate some control for our filters. And so we have a label, and then the input type of range. And cool, so let's just get that on screen so we can see what we're looking at. So let's go back into the filter panel.vue, and we can say import filter input, input from there we go. Running a little slow tonight, but that's okay. And then in our Vue instance, we'll just register our component that we just imported. So components object, and then we can just say filter input. Oh, make sure we put them inside quotes so we can use kebab case. Filter input. All right, cool. So now we should have our component registered, and if we were to just sit there and say filter input like that, we should see a neat little input right there. Cool. No worries. I understand it's there's only so many hours in the night that people can stream, so I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you so much, as always, Andrew. Cool. Alright, so we got our component in there. Obviously it's not looking the best quite yet, but we have something in there, so that's cool. And we can come back in here and let's just say filter name is going to be set to, we'll just say contrast for the time being, and that'll give us that. Cool. And with that, we can say, we can start styling this a little better. So first thing, let's get this label set up properly. So in our style tag, we'll scope it so it's only specific to this component, and none of our styles leak, so we can sit there and say something just like label and target it and not have it affect anything else. Any outside components. So we'll just give it a display property of black. That should drop that down just like that, kind of like how we did it up here. And cool. And right, so we probably won't do much styling on the end of the slider itself, because I think custom styling on that is pretty tricky, so I might just style it off camera and then just bring the code for anybody who wants to plug it into their app for anybody available next stream, but we'll see. So let's just say, let's take a look at this. Actually, I want to see what we have for width. Cool. And we can give this input a class of, I guess, filter input. Cool. Alright, let's target that in our style tag, or whatever you call it, style block. And let's see, what do we want to say? We want to just give it a width of 100%. So that'll do that, but let's see. What we'll have to do is set a padding on the input panel the same. So, okay, cool. Let's do that really quick. So down on our filter panel.view, it looks like we need to scope this as well. Cool. Give it a refresh, and then the next thing we're gonna do is give it a little bit of padding. So filter panel, and we'll say padding, and I think it was 0.25 rem, 0.5 rem. Oh, nope. Looks like it was 0.5 rem for the top and bottom, and then not 0.1, but 1 rem. Alright, cool. So we kind of got the same spacing going on now. And you know what we should do is probably put in a heading kind of deal in here, so we could say something like H3 and just say filters. Or what is this right here? Let's check. Oh, it's a label. And what are the styles set on the label? Font size 100% or 170%. So let's try an H2 and see what that gives us. Alright, so we need to fix our typography really quick. So let's give the H2 a class, and we can just say filter panel dash title. Coolio. And now we can target that in our styles as well. So dot filter panel dash title, and target that. We'll just say font weight, so FW if you're using Emmet. Font weight will normal, or not Emmet, I'm sorry, the autocomplete. And no, we'll do 500. We're trying to match this thing right here. Nope. Let's do 500 again, and then let's give it the same font size and see if that gives us. So FSZ, and then we can type in 100% or 170%. Alright, cool. So that looks about the same. And then we can just give it some margin bottom to space it out just ever so slightly, and say 1 rem. Cool. So we got that going now. Let's see. Is that that'll work for now. Cool. And so let's go back to the filter input component now, and let's target this label and give it just a little bit of size. So we'll say font size and 120%. Let's see what that gives us. It's a little big. Let's just do a 110. And then, cool. So we have our neat little slider, and then also let's give the label a little bit of space underneath it. So margin bottom, and let's just say 0.5 rem. And that might be a little much, so let's say 0.4 rem. And remember, rems are going off of, let's see, where is it? Right here. Nope, not the main. Goodness me. Main CSS. So rems are going off of this HTML font size declaration rule right here. And we have it set at 20 pixels, so 0.4 rem would be, what, 8 pixels, something like that. Cool. That's just a refresher on how rems work, and if you were using, so relative to the HTML font size versus relative to the parent font size kind of thing. And cool. So that gives us a little bit of nice spacing right there, and we got the input slider. I wonder if we give this a height, if it will adjust. Let's see, height of 2 rem. Let's just see what happens here. No, I didn't think so. So I'll look into how to style those, see if it's going to be too much of a pain in the butt, or if it's going to be something that's somewhat manageable. If it's too much trouble, then like I said, I'll figure out how to style it, and we can, you guys can copy the code into your project if you want. Otherwise, we can just omit it. Whatever, doesn't work, doesn't make a difference to me. Whatever you want to do. So we have filter name contrast right there, and cool. So we're not just gonna have a filter name in our filter input component. We're gonna need a few different things. And alright, cool. So let's take a look at what we will need. Okay. So filter name, and then we're gonna have, actually it's gonna be, I guess you could say, we'll set it up as an object, because each of these each filter will be its own object, and in there we'll have a name, and that will be contrast. And then, so we'll do lowercase right now, and then this is kind of important, so we'll do lowercase for the name on our data properties and stuff for the filters, so that way when we transfer that data over as CSS variables, it recognizes it, because there's no capital C contrast in CSS variable filters, and it's case insensitive kind of thing. Or it's gonna look, or it's case sensitive, so it'll look for a capital C, and we won't have one, so we need to alleviate that problem by making sure the name of our filter. It's a foreshadowing, so I'll kind of touch on why we're doing this later on down the road, and explain, and I'll show why it wouldn't work to have it capitalized the way we're doing this, but just so to keep in mind that the name of the filter in our object will be all lowercase. Cool. And then we will just want to set a couple more properties. So we will have a min property, and that'll be the minimum value, and we can adjust these as we go along our project, so based on what filter they are, because some of them won't work as well with the same properties as the other filters. So for instance, the min value and the max value might work differently on invert filter versus saturation filter, and so we'll have to just play around and get it kind of fine-tuned a little bit. But first, let's get this set up. So minimum, we'll just say 0, and then we'll say the max is going to be something like 250, and you might be thinking, shouldn't it be between 0 and 100? Well, sometimes, but the interesting thing about the filters is that, like, if you go past 100%, it actually just keeps applying filters to it in a way that's like oversaturates it, over contrasts it, so it could really brighten up some pictures, and you can have the opposite effect if you know, if you're using like an invert and whatnot. So one in particular that we'll be using is the hue rotate filter, and that one goes, the range for that is all the way from 0 to 360, because we're doing a whole rotation of the hue range. So that would be 0 to 360, where some of them will only be 0 to 100, which we'll see a little bit later on down the road. Cool. Alright, and then so we have our min, we have our max. The next property we need to set is our current, and that is going to track what our current value of the input range is at. And we'll be using vModel for that. And then the last thing we want to do is we're going to have our suffix, and that's just going to be a string containing the suffix of the type of filter. So most of them will be %, some of them will be, like, for instance, the hue rotate, that one, the suffix is DEG for degrees, and then I think there is one more that we might use. Oh, pixels, if we end up using like something like a blur filter, but we probably won't use the blur filter, so it'll just be the % and the DEG for now, if we do use anything. Alright, so that'll be the 5 properties that we have. We have the filter name with the all lowercase, so we have the minimum value, maximum value, current, and suffix. And we could set this min-max in just the input itself, but we're not going to do that. We're going to bind that so we can dynamically apply those based when we render each input for the individual filters. So cool, we got that set up. Let's get the next thing going, and that's building out this input a little bit with our view logic, or our view attributes, actually, I should say. So we will have a few different things, and we will say min equals max equals, and then cool. And so actually we will bind, first thing we want to do is bind vmin, and that's going to be filter.min, and then we'll do the same thing for max. So vbind to max, so colon max equals filter.max. Cool. And then we could say bind to the ID and just call it filter.name. Same thing for up here, bind to the label for attribute, and we'll just say filter.name. And then we'll have to change this as well, because we don't have that property on there anymore. We have filter.name. And that's in there again. Cool, so now I'm just gonna build that out really quick so I can see that. Alright. And what do we want to do now? So let's actually move these up above like we were doing. So we have our view specific attributes on the top, and like our directives, our view directives and whatnot. So what we will need to do is we're going to need to first set up a vModel. And that vModel is going to do set up two-way data binding, and what we're going to be two-way data binding to is the current value. So we'll say filter.current, and then cool. So and then if we right-click on our filter now, or our input, and take a look at the attributes on it, we should see some interesting stuff. And we can see that this is getting all goofed up, but that's totally fine because we have our screen set up so goofily right now that it's not going to make a huge deal. It won't load like this normally, but just don't worry about it. For the time being, everything is just adjusting properly based on the size of the screen in Flexbox, so which is what we want to do in the long run. If we go into our, and you can see that the contrast, it set all the way back down to 0 now, because now it's setting the value of it. Let's see. Yeah, so it gets set at whatever the current is set at initially. So if we were to say 100, I think that'll place it, yeah, about right there. So if we could set some of these we will want to set them at 100 to start, because that will signify or set the CSS filter to 100% initially, and that's what we might need in some of them. So cool, kind of makes sense a little bit. I hope I'm explaining this well enough. And you can see right here it says we have our lowercase contrast. Well, we will use a Vue filter in order to just change that to uppercase. And actually I think we could probably even just do it, we just do it in here with a pipe. I'm not exactly sure, I haven't done it myself yet, but I'll just double check and then we can come back to it. So cool. What do we need to do next? Alright, so next thing let's do is let's get our events going. So the way this is going to work is if you've watched the CSS filter variables project by Westboss in the JavaScript 30 course, which I can link in the description if you want to check that out. We have to use two events, event listeners, to make this work. We're going to use a Mousemove and a change event at the same time, and they're going to be the same method. It's kind of confusing, but just I'll kind of talk along the process of what's going on so we can take a look at it. And the reason why we're doing that is because we're getting the value of the change. We also want to get the value of the Mousemove on the slider, where the slider is to track the position. It's kind of confusing to explain, but once we get it up and working, you'll see what I'm talking about. So first thing, let's go underneath our V model, and we can start by typing in at Mousemove, and that's going to be equal to, we'll call it update filter value. We haven't written that yet, but what we're going to want to do is pass in the filter that we will be passing into this as a prop in just a little bit here. So passing in this whole thing, which will actually be a prop, not sitting in our data property like this. Okay, cool. And so we got our Mousemove. So let's get that let's get that method built or written really quick so we can just see that it's actually in fact firing off. Alright, so underneath data we'll just write methods and set up our methods object, and then we can say update filter value filter. Cool. And then let's just console.log filter dot current. Okay, so let's see what that gives us. Alright, so you see it's when we move our mouse over it, it's console logging over and over again 100. Well, we're not changing anything. But if we were to move it like that, you see it changes a little bit. Cool. And we get the value for the input that it's at, and we get the event triggering off. And I'm not sure if we'll even need to use the change. Oh yeah, we will. Okay, so and then so we'll say at change equals the same thing. Update filter value, and then again we're going to pass the filter in as well. Alright, so we have that, and if we do drag it, we still see the same thing going on. But this will be crucial for when we are changing and applying our filters. So cool. Alright, so what we can say is let's take a look at this. So we'll say filter dot name, filter dot current plus filter dot suffix. So you see that it says contrast 165%. Cool. So that's kind of what we're looking for. And then we can actually make this a little bit better by, instead of concatenation, we're just gonna say template literals. Oh, and then we gotta put these inside some variables. So $ bracket. And again, brackets, and then with the $ in front of it. Delete the space, and cool, we got the same thing. And that's pretty neato Toledo. Okay, so what's the next thing we want to do? So we got that going. We have this going now. And we have an event set up. Cool. So let's, instead of passing in this filter like that, let's set up, let's move this out, and we're going to bring it into the filter panel for the time being, and we'll get our filters built out. I don't know. Let's just try this really quick. Okay, so what we're gonna do really quick is we're gonna take the whole data property like this. Just take the whole thing and we're gonna cut it out. And inside our filter panel.view, in the script tag, we're gonna put this. We're gonna paste our data because we'll have that in here. And so we have that we can use now. And what we're going to do is change it from filter to filters, and we're going to set this up as an array of objects. So we'll just wrap it in an array, just like that. Cool. We have that, and we can just duplicate it now by selecting it, hitting Shift, Alt, and the down arrow, or up arrow if you want to move it up, and we can just say, let's actually, you know what, let's do this like this. So contrast will be the second one, we'll have brightness as the first one, and we'll have that set to 150. Current is 100, the min is 0, and the percentage is the suffix. Cool, so we have two filters in there now, and you can see that this is broken. at the moment, but that is all right. So what do we want to do? How do we get this to work now? So we need to pass in our filter as a prop, right? So filter equals filter. Oops. And we don't have this quite ready yet, so but we're gonna set that up next. And okay, so we have our filter component, our filter input component inside the filter component, and we're passing our filter data into it as a prop. So on the inside the filter input, we need to set up our props array, and it's going to be an array of strings, and it's going to just say filter because that's the name of the prop we're passing in. And that should all click over on this now. Cool. And we need to set up the most crucial thing for all this is we're going to loop through this array of filters and generate a component for each of them. So let's do that. We'll use a v-for, and it's basically a for loop in Vue. So v-for, and it's going to say filter. Actually, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to pass in two arguments, and the first one is the filter, so the each of the array, and then the second argument is the index that we get for the iteration of the loop. And then we'll say, so we have filter index in filters, and then next thing we just need to do is just bind to the key, and we'll say indexed. Cool. Now what do we want to do? Alright, right away we already see we have our stuff back in there, and it looks like we have different values applied as well. Well, it's the same values, but we have different max min, so they're showing up differently. Cool. Very, very, very cool. Alright, so what do we want to do now? We're going to set up, if we were to have, let's just duplicate it. So we have 4 of them, just for the time being. If we were going to say alright, so we'll say we want to apply Flexbox to these filters, so that way they're evenly spaced. And we're going to do that using the utility library we've been using in this project. And so what we want to do is wrap the filter input component loop in an outside wrapper, and we're going to apply Flexbox to that wrapper. So we'll just say dot filter panel. Oops, gosh, I can't spell that right word, or spell that word right tonight. Jeez. Input group wrapper, and then we'll say dot flexbox dot flexdir call to give it a flex direction of column, and should be all we need to do. If we hit tab and apply those styles, and then move our filter input component into that div. Let's see if that gives us what we want, and we just need to apply the class of flex1 to each filter. So class equals flex1. Alright, let's see, is that gonna give us what we want? No? Let's see what's going on here. Let's take a look-see. So we got Flexbox displaying properly. Does our input have... Oh, you know what? What we need to do is say... Wait, is this filter panel, input wrapper? Hold on, let's see what's going on here. I think this input wrapper needs... Yeah, so let's give this input wrapper... Let's see, so if we put Flexbox on here, and then say Flexter call, like that, and then just say Flex1 before these classes right here. Alright, cool, there we go. Alright, so let me break this down a little bit. So what we did... Let's just delete it. So this is what we're stuck at. We need to get, we have flex, this panel is a flex item. This whole thing is a flex item. We need to set Flexbox on it though, so we can get everything spaced evenly. This H2 has an explicit or an implicit height because we don't have it explicitly set and we're not setting a flex value on it. So it's just going to go off of the implicit height of the text. That's good. Cool. So let's take on this outer div with the class of filter panel after the Flex6 property. So this is important with Flexbox Utility Libraries object, and we need to have that before the child Flex classes. So after Flex6 we can type in Flexbox. That's going to apply Flexbox to the whole thing, and you can see that it's already goofed up a little bit because it changed the flow of Flexbox from or set the flow of Flexbox to the default, which is row. We don't want that for this situation because you can see it's not displaying quite correctly. So let's, and next thing we want to do, so we have this H2 with the implicit height set already based on the text size. We want to give this div with the class of filter panel input group wrapper, which wraps all of our inputs. We want to give that a flex of 1 to tell it to take up all the individual or all the remaining space. And that being said, it's going to apply the next classes of Flexbox, which it sets the children as display flex and flex direction column. So let's get that set up. So we have Flexbox flexdir call on the outside parent component, setting this like that, and then so after Flexbox flexdir call, oh, what did I say? I just lost my train of thought. Sorry, guys. Jeez Louise. Okay, so what was it? So Flexbox, flexdir call, and then... Yeah, okay, so before these guys, we want to give this outside div wrapper a class of flex1. Alright, so, yeah, flex-1. Alright, so that turns this div into saying take all the remaining space, and then it takes that remaining space and divvies it up for all the filter input components that we render out. Cool. Alright, well I hope that was somewhat difficult or somewhat easy to follow along with. Alright, cool. So we can actually get rid of these two now, the brightness and contrast filter duplicates, since we have just that, and then just have two at the moment, so that's alright. It doesn't look the best, but we will fix that shortly. So let's take a look at our work log. Alright, we got the we're working on this right now, and let's just say we'll add a second step as write logic for filters. Alright, we're almost there. So we got this built out. We're gonna write logic for our filters. We're kind of working on that. We're almost done. And then we just need to let's just say register as component in panel filter panel. Alright, cool. So we got that taken care of. We just need to finish the logic, and that'll kind of be a come back to point for this step right here when we get a little bit further down the road. Alright, so 50 minutes in, I'm going to take a quick break. In the meantime, if you want to go check out the Coding Garden live stream, I know that CJ is doing some awesome stuff right now. You can go feel free to check that out. Otherwise, check out the awesome grooves for just a few minutes. I'll be back in a few, and when we get back, we'll be taking a look at setting up our CSS variables for our filters. So it'll be a lot of fun. Don't go anywhere, stick around. If you go anywhere, go to Coding Garden and come back in just a few. I'll be back and we'll keep going. Thanks again for tuning in to RabbitWerks live coding sessions, and yeah, we'll be back in a few. Alright, and we are back. Thank you for your patience. And before the break, we were just building out the filter input component and getting it set up in our filter panel component. Excellent, excellent. Alright, let's see what's going on here. Cool. And I just wanted to take this second to drop a little bit of knowledge or whatever, a little bit of an announcement. So I'll be doing a sticker giveaway for basically 100 subscribers on YouTube, and then 500 subscribers or 500 followers on Instagram. I'll be doing a little sticker giveaway with the RabbitWerks logo and a couple other things on there. So if you're interested in getting some sweet little dev stickers with the RabbitWerks logo and a couple of little other awesome stickers, subscribe. If you're not, follow me on Instagram if you're not, and then I'll go through and just probably do a little bit of a giveaway. And I'm thinking about having between 20 25 packs to give away. So if you want more information on that, stay tuned, subscribe, and I'll be posting more information about that very soon. And cool. So 100 subscribers on YouTube and 50 or 500 followers on Instagram. We'll get some stickers sent out to some awesome people. And cool. Music again is brought to you by Free Code Camp Radio. Go ahead and check those guys out as well. And excellent. Without further ado, let's get started. So back in here, we're going to go and take a look at setting up our filters with CSS. So we are going to be using CSS variables in order to make this whole thing work. And let's actually get that set up. So let's go into our main CSS, and we already have a couple of variables set up for some colors for the styles of our app. So we got some nav bar coloring with some opacity, light green for the side panel, and then off-white for the text, which is cool. And excellent. So let's get some filters set up. So we have, let's see, I'm going to pull up, let's actually go like this, CSS filters, and we can go to MDN and take a look at what they have. And so if you look at all this stuff right here, pretty neat. You can change the Mozilla, they have it all changed out, pretty neat. Let's see, where blur, brightness, contrast, drop shadow, grayscale, hue, rotate, invert, opacity, saturation, sepia. Alright, so we're not going to use all of them because some of them don't really apply to the fact that like you won't really want to do the blur. I mean, you can add all of these if you want, but what we're going to set up is basically we're going to have the brightness. So we'll start by that. We'll just say dash dash brightness. And this is where I was talking about kind of makes sense with our filter object that we have set up in our view properties right here, and how we have the name set to lowercase. The reason why is because the filter name itself in CSS is lowercase, and so instead of having to just like do some JavaScript to convert it to be to lowercase b or whatever in each case, then we're just gonna set it as the lowercase variants of it right away. And then what we'll do is when we display it, we will use a filter, a view filter, and uppercase the first letter. So that's how we'll alleviate that whole thing. Cool. So brightness, and if we remember from when we first set up our first CSS variables, it's dash dash, then the name of the variable, and then colon, and then the value of that. So we're going to just say, what is it? Let me just double check. Alright, oops. Okay, so brightness, it's just going to be at 100% because we want it to be 100% brightness right away. Alright, so the next one we're going to set at is contrast. Cool. Dash dash contrast and colon. Right. And this one is going to be set at 100% as well. And then the next one, if we take a look at it, so we won't do drop shadow because drop shadow won't be applied to the actual image itself, it's just to the element. We don't need drop shadow in this case, so we can skip over that. We can do grayscale if we want, we don't necessarily need to. If you want to, we can, so we'll just say grayscale, and that will be set at values between is. So a value of, if we look right here, it says a value of 100% is completely grayscale. A value of 0% leaves the input unchanged. So we will set this one to the initial value of 0%. All right, cool. Oops, 0%, just like that. Then, all right, what's the next one going to be? So this is the hue rotate, next one, and okay, so we'll say dash dash hue dash rotate. Oop, rotate like that. And then this one is going to be the DEG prefix, or suffix, I'm sorry. So we'll set that as 0 degrees, so we don't have any hue rotation on it to start. What's the next one going to be? Invert. Alright, so you've probably seen this one a bunch of times. It's where it changes this into like that creepy negative photo looking. So we're just going to set that one up. Dash dash in, oops, not II, so dash dash invert. And that is going to be 0% as well. Cool. And the next one, we have opacity set up. We're not going to do opacity. You can do it if you want, but it just changes the opacity of the image. So not really all that useful in this situation, but go ahead, feel free to add it if you want. So the next one we're going to put in is saturate. So we'll say dash dash saturate. And this one will be 100%. And so if we look right here, it says what I was kind of alluding at beforehand, is that a value of 0% is completely unsaturated. A value of 100% leaves the input unchanged. Other values are linear multipliers on the effect. Values of amounts over 100% are allowed, providing supersaturated results. Cool. So you can see right here, it's just like super saturated, and yeah, so this is an instance of where we will have the max set above 100. Cool. All right, what's the next one that we have? I believe there's one more, and it is sepia, or sepia, however you pronounce it. So we'll say dash sepia, and we'll say 0%, because we don't want any sepia applied right away. Alright, cool. And that should be all that we need for our CSS variables for our filters. Alright, now that we have the variables set up, next thing we need to do is get those filters or those variables applied to some filters on our actual image. So let's go back to the app now, and what we can do is, let's just say cloud and area. I'm just going to pull in an image so we have something to look at. Sign in with RabbitWerks Getters. Okay, let's pull out this image right here just for the heck of it. And you can click this link right here. It's kind of cut off, but we can just copy the link. And that's the generated cloud and area link with all the, what is it? All the formatting and all the compression and all the quality boosting and all that good stuff that they do on their end, and then they send over a link with all that stuff changed in the image itself and the processed image, and they send it back over. Cool. Cloud and area is awesome. So let's go to our app and we can take that link and place it in there, and my internet is going slow right now, so it's gonna take so long. My downtime, my down speed is super slow right now, but the up speed is alright. We have that. Cool. Jeez. Excellent. So let's go into our display image component right here, and then so we need to make sure we scope our styles properly. I just want to make sure everything is getting scoped. Alright, nothing is scoped, so we're just going to scope everything, because we should have, that one is, it should be all of it now. Don't have any styles in our main. That's scoped, and that's scoped. Alright, everything else is good to go. Alright, sorry about that, just wanted to clean it up. So we can go in here and close out all this good stuff for the time being, and then everything is all goofed up. That actually looks kind of nice. That image, but that's not what we're looking for, so refresh it and it'll give us back what we're looking for. Okay, cool. So in this image display, in this image display class right here, this is what we're going to set our CSS properties in, our CSS variables in. Itself, we'll just set the CSS property of filter on it just like that, and we can say colon, and next we can type in a list of stuff. So we can set just one, or we can set multiple ones. So we'll just tab in, and we can start by saying the first one that we had set up. Let's move this over just slightly again so we can just get both of these on here. Actually, let's just open that up. Open this panel to the right so we can see it right here. So the first filter we have is brightness. Oops. So we set it by saying brightness, and it's a function, and inside the function is what we're going to pass the value in. So inside the parentheses we'll say var, and that's going to call a CSS variable, that basically saying we have a custom property that we're going to use. And in there is where we type the name of our CSS property. So dash dash brightness. Right? That should be all we need to get that going. And I think, yeah, what is the separation on this? Where is it? Separation on that is nothing. So we just separate them by spaces. So the next one we want to set up is the contrast. So we'll say contrast, which is again a function that we pass var into, which is a function that calls the name of our property and pulls the value of it, returns the value of it. And we should be able to see some changes automatically already. So let's, I'm just gonna readjust this. And sorry about the resizing of the windows and whatnot. I'm planning on hopefully getting, the issue is my monitor resolution is 1920 by 1200. So when I'm broadcasting in 1080p, the bottom 120 pixels get cut off. Therefore, my terminal gets cut off, which isn't cool. So I might be getting a different monitor with just 1080p resolution of like the 19 by or 16 by 9. But for the time being, I just have to play around with these window panels. So if that is annoying to you, I sincerely apologize, and I'm working on alleviating it as soon as possible. So thank you. And let's see, so let's get this image in there really quick. It's going to take forever to load, and right now we're not going to see anything different. It's just going to be the same because we haven't changed any. Everything is set to the default values in our actual CSS properties. So let's do something and change contrast to 200 and see what that gives us. And right away you see it change, and it's a lot more vivid, a lot more like contrasting in the colors and whatnot. So that's kind of what we're looking for. If we change the brightness to something like 10%, and you can just see it just darkens it right up. You can hardly even see it anymore. 50%, pretty dark, but might be good for like really adjusting the brightness slightly. We might not have it set so ridiculously low. For 0 as a min, we'll probably do between like 50 and 100, 120. You can play around with it, fine-tune the peak, or fine-tune the range that you want to set for the individual properties, and then yeah, cool. All right, so we do have confirmation that those guys are working now. Let's get the rest of them in there. All right, so we have, next one is grayscale, and grayscale is with an A, and then we'll say var dash dash grayscale. Next one is going to be hue rotate, so it is hue rotate with a dash, and then in there, same thing, hue rotate. Alright, and then next thing is going to be the invert filter, and var parentheses dash dash invert, which is the name of the filter property for that, or the CSS property we have set up for that. And two more, so we have saturate, which is var dash dash saturate, and last but not least sepia, var dash dash sepia. Cool. That should be all we need, so we'll put a colon at the, or a semicolon at the end of that statement, just like that, and that should be all we need to get that going. So we have the filter set up on our image, which is cool, and let's see where we at, work log. Close that so we can read things properly. Set up CSS variables for filters. Alright. Okay, so now that we have that, we can go back into our properties. Actually, you know what? We're not going to do that quite yet. What we'll do is we're going to finish building our filter objects, and then we'll go back in and get these things linked up. Cool. So let's see, where do we want to go from here? We're going to set filter panel.view, and we can just duplicate this a couple of times. So we'll say, we'll open this back up to the right, full screen it for now, just so we can see everything without it being too smushed. So grayscale, this is going to be a min of, let's just say 25, and the max we'll set to 100. Or the min we want 0, because, and the current we want 0, because if we remember when we were reading it, it was saying that 100% is completely grayscale, 0% is no grayscale. Cool. So brightness, we're going to change to 50% for the min, or 50 for the min, and 150 for the max. We'll go with that for now. It'll probably completely wash it out, but we'll see. Alright, next one we're going to have is our hue rotate. So we can just say for the name, hue-rotate. Min is going to be 0, and then max will be 360 because it's rotating in 360 degrees, full circle. And the current will be 0%, and then the suffix will be the DEG. Again, cool. Next one we can move to is going to be invert. And this is going to be 0, and then it's just going to be 100% on the invert filter. So we'll change the suffix back to a %. Excellent, we are getting closer, 2 more to go. So the next one is going to be saturate. And this one will be the same thing. We can set this as a high value. So we'll just say 250 for the time being, 0 for the min. And last but not least, we have the sepia. And we were just going to have that set to 100 for the max. Cool. 0, 0, 0. We want to say saturate is going to be 100%. Invert is going to be 0%. Hue rotate, we want 0. Grayscale 0. Alright, cool. We got all that good stuff going now. And this won't stay in this component. We're going to switch all of this over to the Vuex store in just a little while. We might do it now in this episode. We might do it in a future episode, or the following episode, I should say. But so, all right, where are we at now? So cool, we got all that good stuff. So I'm just gonna take a second and add everything. Oops. Git add. Whoops, we need to remember to switch into sorry, wrong buttons. There we go. Just a little bit of adjustment. Alright, we need to make sure we switch into the project directory before we try and add stuff to our Git repo. So we'll say git add all, and then git commit -m, and I'm just going to say added filter input component and updated main CSS for with filter vars, updated image with filter vars. Cool. And we will just send that on up just for the heck of it. So you can go and check out the repo if you want. It'll be available right now. And look at that, we have all of our filters in there, and they're nice and evenly spaced. And cool, look at that. It's pretty sweet. I like it. Okay, so and then if we were to go full screen on this bad boy, we got the full screen on the image, and it preserves our aspect ratio somewhat. We'll have to fine tune that a little bit. Right now it's just setting it based on the max width, max height, so I think that'll work. And we can smallify that one more time. Cool. Close this out, and let's take a look at our work log. Okay, so what is the next thing we want to do? Well, we need to be able to change these filters when we move this stuff around, because right now you see that we're logging the values, and if we change it and all that good stuff, right? So we want to be able to have those changes applied to our CSS properties that we had, CSS variables that we have set up. So how exactly are we going to do that? Well, we need to target our CSS variables. Alright, so, but how do we do that? So our CSS variables are sitting in the root level of our DOM tree styling, and it's kind of tricky, but we'll have to target those with our where is it? Not this component. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's open up the right component. So filter input. So this update filter value, we're gonna pass in. We're gonna have to start targeting those variables we set. So let's take a look. How do we get access to the root variables or the root property that we have set up? Well, we have to access it by saying it's part of the document, and then so it's kind of strange, so I'll just walk you through it. Document element, and then this gets a reference to the root node of the document. So the root node is, if we look at our main.css, the root node is right here. So this sets our variables up in the root node, and this is how we're targeting it. So document.documentElement.style, which is going to say that they're part of CSS properties on the root element. And then we are going to just say set property. So we want to, it's a method, and it's going to set that property we have on there. All right, so first it's a function, and it takes two arguments. So the first argument is the property name we're going to adjust, and the second argument is the value. And then I guess the third argument that you can take is a priority, so which is optional, which I haven't ever had to use, so we won't worry about it right now. So set property, we're going to use again template literals on this, so we can actually just take this up here, copy that. Or actually, before we do that, let's set up the okay. So set property, it takes two things. It takes property name and a value. So what are we going to pass in for the first argument as a property value? Well, if we have the console name, or we have the filter name, right, that's set up, and we have CSS property name set up, and how do we target that? Okay, so let's go in here, and we can use template literals, backticks, and we can just type in the name of the variable as if we were calling it, or as if we were targeting it with var, and then we should be able to pass in our filter and our filter.name to it, and it'll generate as we were calling a root variable using template strings. Kind of hard to explain, but it's pretty straightforward when you see it. So let's do that. So set property, pop a set, the first argument, pop a set of backticks in there, and we'll say dash dash, and then template literal variable, so $ brackets, and in there we'll say filter.name, right? And that should be what we need to target the correct filter variable, because it's going to prefix it with this dash dash and then the name that we have set up. So if we were to say that right here, we can actually just copy this in to right here and take a look at what that looks like. So if we scroll over it, it's giving us errors right now, but that's okay. So you can just see right here, it generates it properly. Cool. So we're targeting that, and then we're gonna say filter name, and then basically set it to what we have set right here, this value. So we can copy that whole thing in. So a template string, and it's gonna be $ filter dot current, which will get the current value, and then we can place in another template literal, And in there, we're going to say filter.suffix, right? Cool. That should be all we need. Let's take a look and see if we're getting any errors. Doesn't look like we're getting any errors. Let's load in our image one more time. Copy that in from Cloudinary. Paste it in. It's going to take a second to load up because my down speed is tremendously slow tonight. Alright, moment of truth. So we have our guys in there, our image in there, and we're just gonna see if this triggers. And it looks like we're working. Cool. Sweet. So we have all of our stuff working out. Grayscale looks like it's working alright. Brightness, contrast, yeah. And then this is a lot of fun. The hue rotate. That's my favorite. Can play around with that. That's working real well. Invert works really nicely. Saturate, nice. Kind of like a grayscale effect as well. So if you just wanted, we could probably take the grayscale out. Actually, I think in the prototype app I took the grayscale out and just left saturate at 50% or 0, so you could grayscale it that way. And what we could do is double click to reset it. I don't know. If it's a double click, it might trigger it. We'll have to see what happens. Or we'll just have a reset filters button. And sepia, that gives it that old world look. Cool. And it might look a little goofy at the moment, but that's because they're so squished out. And awesome, we have our logic set up, so our filters are working, and I hope that makes sense. So let's just walk through this one more time. So when this filter gets, when the mouse move, it calls the method, and when it changes, it'll call the method. So when both of these events happen, it'll call the document element, which will give us access to the root. We're targeting the styles of that element or root, and then we're setting the property of each filter name that we're targeting by the value and the suffix of each filter to that property that is set up as a CSS variable that controls our CSS filters on our image. So full circle on that. Cool. And now we can actually type in. That is good to go. Start. All right. Cool. So all right, we got that. So let's switch focus and we can start talking about Vuex Store in just a minute here. And I just gotta go check on something. Just a second. Give me 1 minute. 1 second. Alright, sorry about that. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so we are going to switch focus a little bit and start talking about Vuex a little bit, because we're at the point where we got basic functionality of our app going and it's time to start switching over to some state management stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about Vuex. Alright, cool. So let's see. Take a look at this. We can start by opening up our store.js. So what is Vuex? Well, Vuex is the state management system for Vue. And we can get rid of that. We don't need that in there right now. And basically, we're gonna Vuex acts as one source, or like one true source of truth, or one source of truth kind of thing, concept, and all of our state's gonna live in here. And you can break it up into modules, which I don't think we're gonna get into in this project because it's a little bit more advanced for our use case in this point in time, but you can break it up into modules because everything being in one file at the end of the day is very, very hard to navigate through, and it's always great to kind of modularize things. So cool. What do we need to do though? So our state is going to be our global, our root level data property essentially. Getters are going to be functions that we set up that will return values as computed properties to our Vue instances and Vue components based on what we have set up in our Getters properties. Mutations. So mutations and actions are kind of work with each other. Mutations mutate the state. So basically, we'll set up functions in our mutations that will change properties in the state, and mutations run synchronously, so they'll happen right away. So the reason why we do that is you can't really wait for something to go back and happen unless you're using like a promise kind of thing, but we don't do that in Vuex. We use what's called an action. An action is basically a method that we can perform asynchronously to call some sort of other action, which would be like the mutation, to perform some sort of mutation on our state. So the action calls the mutation, which calls the state, or which changes the state. Basically to get the asynchronous nature of functions and whatnot, or you can get that through actions. And so if you had something that was like 3 different mutations that's changed 3 different properties, and you had an action that you wanted to change, all 3 of them, you would just call one action and then just commit all 3 mutations of the values that you're passing in as payloads or whatever. So a lot of words, a lot of talking and stuff. I know that when I first started getting into Vuex, even though I watched some really great tutorials and really great lessons and whatnot, it was still kind of hard to wrap my head around a little bit, although it is pretty synonymous with the way that Vue works. So I'll try to do my best to explain it, and I will also link intro to Vuex video, actually by CJ on the Coding Garden. You can go check that out. It's about an hour long, and he walks through the basic uses of Vuex and how to use it and whatnot. So if you're still confused after this, and you can go over there and check out that resource. Cool. Alright, so let's get started. So let's focus on the state for right now. So the state is our global state for our app. It's our data, all of that good stuff. So what do we have right now for data? We basically just have, close this, we have a couple of things. We have all this stuff, so our filters, and then we also have the image loader, which has our image source. And I believe that's all we're gonna need at the moment. So let's go into the store, and we can just say image source. And that's going to be an empty string to start out with. And then we will say filters and that's going to be an array. We can actually just go into our filter panel and just take all of this good stuff, all the filter objects we've created, and cut it out. And we'll go back into the store and paste it in just like that. Cool. So now we have all of our stuff in there. We don't just fix this space right here. Excellent. And it's saying that it can't find, or it's having issues on this end, so that's fine. We don't need the data property at all anymore, actually. We don't have our filters anymore, but that's fine. So we'll get them back in just a second. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. Okay, so what we need to do is we are going to say we have our state set up, we have our filters and our image source. So let's start writing some getters. Okay, so the way getters work is we're just gonna say it's just like writing functions for our computer, or for our methods down here, which we don't have any right now, but so just bear or follow along with this, and then we'll kind of walk through as we do it. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to write a getter to get the image source, or actually, you know what, we're going to do just the filters for right now, because the image source is going to be a little bit different since we have to set up a two-way data binding for that. Or actually, we can do both of them actually. So let's just start with the image source for now. So image source, or we'll say get image, and that's going to be a function that takes the state, and we'll write ES6 arrow functions for this, and that's the preferred method to doing it. And then we can just say, instead of even having a body, we'll just say state dot image source. Okay, so what this does is when we call this getter, we're passing in the state, and it's gonna return state dot image source. Cool. And then the next thing we want to do is say get filters, and we'll just say state and state dot filters. So it's gonna, same thing as when we call get filters, we're pass in the state and we return the state dot filters. Cool. And actually with that we should be able to see some changes automatically right away. So let's go into dev tools, pull that up a little bit. Fresh filters not defined, okay, because we don't have it passed in yet. Let's go into the Vue dev tools, and then if we click this tab icon right here, it's switches to Vuex, and then now we can see we got our base state set up, or our state set up, and everything is in there. So image source is an empty string, and we have our array of filters, and everything is set in there. Cool. Excellent. So what's the next step? So let's get these filters onto our filter panel component. So underneath so there's a couple things we got to do. First, we got to be able to use ooh, this track is sweet. Alright, just in time for our track highlight of the night, and it is, let's see where are we at, Missing You by Days of Contrast. Cool. I'm going to link the track in the description if you want to check it out. Go check out the artist and support the cause. Thanks Code Camp Radio, free Code Camp Radio for all the awesome beats. Thank you Days of Contrast for the awesome groove. Excellent. Okay. Track highlight. Anyways, we are in here and so with Vuex, we work with computed properties mainly in our Vue instances to get the data back. So the first thing we need to do is we're just going to set up underneath our components object, we're going to set up our computed object. Alright, and then we're just going to say we're just going to say filters actually, because the name of the property is going to be what it pretty much Vue will take and turn into a data property, but it's going to be a computed property. So what we name it is the name of the property it'll evaluate to. So filters, which is a function, and then this function will return this $store, which gives us access to the store, the Vuex store globally. So this $store .getters, which gives us access to the getters in the store, and then the name of our getter. So it's going to be get filters, and boom, look at that. So let's just give that a comma right there. Alright, so we got our filters on there again, and they're being pulled in from our Vuex store, which is cool. And if we take a look, we can see that all of the properties all the attributes are loading properly as well. Alright, next thing we want to do, and we don't even have to do anything else. So filters is being passed in from how we had it set up before automatically, and it's just working really nicely. Excellent. Right. And let's see if we can get let's see. Alright, so let's move into our display image.view, and this is where we're going to want to pull in not the image source right here, but we're going to delete this data property again, and not mounted. We're going to say computed, which is an object. Cool. Computed is going to have a property in there we are going to call image src image source. Actually, let's just type it out since that's what we did in the Vuex store, just so everything is streamlined together, we have some consistency. And that is going to be a function that returns this $store to access the store from our globally .getters .get image. Cool. So we have that in there now, and what we need to do to finalize this is let's set our image source to begin with. So let's go into the image loader, and then what we will say on this is where we're going to have to start working with some mutations and some actions. So really quick, let's just write, we have at import set image source, and we're going to say actually, this is how we're going to do it. So we're going to do it inline for now. we can delete this method. We can actually delete the whole methods object. Crazy, I know, but it just might work. Alright, so we need to import something that comes along with Vuex, and it's going to be called the mapActions helper. So basically this allows us to call actions, Vuex actions, from inside our component. And cool, so you'll see that in a second. So we'll say import mapActions from, and then we just import it relatively, so from Vuex, from the package. And cool, so that should be all that we need for that. And then we can take our data, and in here we're just going to have a methods object again, and in methods we're going to spread into mapActions, and what that does is gives us access to what we have, the actions, which right now we don't have any at the moment, but all the actions that we have set up in our store, spreading into mapActions like this will give us access to those, and then we just pass in as an array the names of the functions that we want, or the actions that we want. So we don't have any, yeah, so we'll just say setImageSource. Right? Okay. And then we just can comment that, and that should be all that we need for that to be. Right? And next thing we will do is we can do this inline. So at our input box, what is it yelling at us for? Object is not a function. Where's that coming from? Image loader 27. Oh, okay, let's see. So let's go into our Vuex store really quick, and let's write this action. So we'll say set image source, and then I like to modify it with an underscore and then just say store, so I know what I'm calling, and that is going to be a function. And then we'll come back to this in just a second. So same thing for the mutations. I like to do set image source and then underscore and then just say muta, so I know that we're calling the mutation. And that's just like a personal convention that I like to do. So you don't have to, you can do whatever you like, but it helps to make things a little bit more clear, because I like to name it the same thing but just kind of like variance it based on what, if it's an action or a mutation, all that good stuff. So let's go back with our empty functions in there now. We should be able to just get it all in there. So set image source store, and then right here store. What is it saying? Object is not a function. Add. It should be, what the heck? Let me just see, it might be mistaken on that. Okay, so hold on a second. Oh, my apologies. Let's see, actions. Oh, I'm sorry. Because it's a named import, so we need to wrap it like that. Alright, so mapActions as a named import from Vuex inside of our methods object. Boom. Okay. Cool, and then so we can fix that. So that's store, and then this is store as well. Alright, so we're almost done with that, and we just need to say we're passing in a parameter with this action, and the way we do that is just by setting up parentheses after it, or kind of like you were to invoke it and passing in parameters inside of it. So all we want to do is just say event.target.value, and that for right now is just going to give us the value of what's in this box when it changes or when we input something. Right? Image source. Oop. Image source. Cool. And we actually don't need that on here anymore. So it's just the event listener. Let's refresh it. No errors. Cool. Alright, so we're passing in the event target.value, which will be the source or what we type in here. And let's just move back to the Vuex store. Alright. And so we have our action right here, and we're passing in. There's a couple things that we need to set up. So the actions, the first argument is going to be commit. Okay, so basically the first argument is we have to pass in the context, and the context is basically another word for our Vuex instance, right? So there's a couple things we gotta do. So we'll say context and then payload, and payload is the second argument that gets passed in as the value or whatever we're passing in through the action. So the first argument is automatically the context, and then the second argument is the first argument that we pass in, any parameters that we pass in. So if you have multiple parameters, we'll have to pass it in as an object, because you can only pass in the context and the payload. There's only two arguments you can pass in. So if you have multiple arguments you need to pass through, you need to pass it in as payload will be an object, not just a singular variable. Alright, cool. So the next thing we do is we'll say context, and that calls our first argument, and context.commit, and that's basically commit means we're going to call a mutation, commit a mutation to our state, right? And so the name of our mutation is setImageSource and underscore muta, and then that is going to take the second argument will be our payload, which will be our image source, right? And then just so we know, I like to sometimes we'll write a comment above it and just say payload equals image source, just so I know. Alright, so next thing we want to do is we're going to move over to the mutations, or move up to the mutations, and kind of the same thing in this. So what we'll say is the first thing we get is the state, and then what we have, so the state is the first argument that gets passed in automatically, and then the second argument is again our payload. So next we can say inside the function body, we'll say state dot image source, which is referring to this property right here, and then we're going to set that equal to payload, right? Comment that out. And then this might be giving you an error. It's because ESLint is giving an issue. Assignment to property of function parameter state no param reassign. For Vuex and Vue, it's based on this like setting and getting of parameters so it works based on mutations, mutating the state, and ESLint doesn't like that. So for right now, they don't have this issue worked out. So if you want to alleviate that, you can just either type in above it -- ESLint - disable next line, and that'll disable the next line. As you can see, now the error is gone. But what I like to do, instead of having those all over the place, is excuse me, in VS Code we can click this problems tab right here, and you can see what it's giving us for an issue: assignment to property of function parameter, no param reassign. Right click on that, and we can say disable no param reassign for this line like we had before, and it'll just disable that specific rule for the next line. But instead of doing that, I'm just going to right click on it and say disable no param reassign for the entire file, so that way whenever I call upon the state and I'm changing something, it doesn't give me that error. Cool. And yeah, hopefully they'll be able to work that bug out pretty quick. And I think that should be all that we need to do this and get this running. So if we, in theory, have that on there, we should be able to see an image in here. So let's pull up our image really quick. Select all. And the filters won't work because we don't have those adjusted, we don't have the actions and mutations written yet. We'll come back to that in our next session. But for now, we're just gonna see if this works. So a moment of truth. And look at that. We got our image loading in just right. And I think, yeah, this isn't working because we don't have our stuff. Oh wait, look at that. It's still working. Crazy. Let's see. We don't even need to do anything else. We don't need to adjust the filters based on the state because we're getting it already right here. And then inside of the filter input, we're passing that to the root document root already. So cool. I thought we were gonna have to pull in that information, get it all set up and stuff, but no, looks like we're good to go. I don't know, actually. Let's see if I don't think if our Vuex state is being adjusted. Yeah, so we will want to come back to this and make sure that our state is being changed properly through the Vuex store, and then going back through to our main CSS file and changing it through that. But for right now, this is giving us a good rundown example of what we're looking at, and cool. And let's see, where is this at? Let's load it in one more time. Cool. Oh man, it's so slow. It's so bad. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so this is going to be a good place to stop for the night, and let's just take a look at work log. We talked about Vuex. We got our store started, and it's going pretty well, actually. See that? Cool. Episode 3, it looks like it's going to be complete. So what I will do is, let's get back to our terminal. Just say git add all, git commit -m updated git commit updated refactored app to use Vuex state actions, hold on, actions, mutations, set up for image load. Cool. And we'll just push that through. Alright, so by tomorrow, or by the next day, I'm gonna have have this app up on Netlify hosted, so we can go and take a look at it. You can go and take a look at the project repository. I'll have the link in the description as well. Cool. Yeah, and if you feel like we're always looking for more help in the Coding Garden community app as well, we're using Vuex, or not Vuex, Vuex, yeah, but using Vue Native, Express, MongoDB, making a mobile app for the Coding Garden community channel, or community, yeah, so it'll be a lot of fun. We could always use more help. I'll have the link in the description if you want to get involved in that, as well as don't forget, at 100 subscribers for YouTube and 500 followers for Instagram, I will be releasing, or I will be doing a sticker giveaway for RabbitWerks JavaScript. And so if you want to get more information on that, stay tuned, check out my Twitter and check out my Instagram for more information. I'll probably post something on YouTube as well to try and keep that going and get some information on that medium as well. So until then, it'll probably be in the next 2 weeks or so that I'll get that all kind of squared away and get more details going as soon as possible. But yeah, 100 subscribers on YouTube and or 500 followers on Instagram, and we'll get some stickers sent out to about 20-25 people. Thank you so much for the support, and keep coming back and checking it out. We're learning a lot. I love it. So much fun. Cool. And I think without any more to do, we can just recap really quick. We just got our filter panels set up and finished. We got our input panel built out, the input panel built out, the filter input panel, and we got our filter input component built out. We're looping through that, and we're setting the properties dynamically based on the state of our Vuex store, and everything is working really nicely so far. We got a nice image that we can adjust color on and change the rotation of the hue, all that fun stuff. Cool. Alright, well, next time we'll be getting a little bit further on this. We'll be going through and setting up our CSS filter events through the store, and then we can probably get our links set up, get a router set up, and of course move on to the next big part of this app, which is going to be getting a canvas element set up, bouncing this image, adjusted image, over to that canvas, bouncing that down to a data URL, and then saving that URL to our computer, and we'll have an edited photo. Excellent. Cool. Well, again, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of RabbitWerks live coding sessions, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome content. Tune in every week from we'll be doing this Thursday evening Central Standard Time at 8:30 p.m. And if anything changes, just make sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram to get all the updates. If anything changes for scheduling, I'll keep the schedule posted on here. Again, thank you so much for taking time out of your night to come check this out. And wherever the sun is or moon is in the sky in your land, have a good whatever time of day it is. And thank you again for tuning in to RabbitWerks JavaScript. Have a good night. Stay awesome. Peace.